Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum, and today we are on the gathering lawn underneath a beautiful Cercis canadensis Ace of Hearts, because wouldn't you know it, it's in the bean family, and we've got a program for you today where we are breaking up the bean family, or having fun with Fabaceae, as Dennis called it. Really, the official title we went with was Breaking Up Fabaceae, which is just the worst portmanteau of the two you could come up with. But it's been a hot summer. We're in the middle of a drought. You can forgive some of our errors in judgment. But we got a great program for you today. We got Dennis Carey, our curator here, as well as Evan Villani, our research technician. They've got a PowerPoint that will tell you everything you need to know about the bean family. And then we've got some specimens here to show off and elaborate upon that further. So it should be a wonderful program. Those of you watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel, and feel free to leave a comment down below. And with the announcements out of the way, I will pass things over to Dennis and Evan to tell us all about the bean family, Fabaceae.
All right, let me share my screen. So fun with Fabaceae. I'm glad you like that title. I was talking to my wife last night and outran Beans, Good for the Heart by her, and she wasn't a fan of that one.
Well, geez, I can't imagine why.
So we're going to go with Fun with Fabaceae. So it's an interesting topic. When Evan came up with it, I was like, wow, that's a pretty big topic. I got it down to 30 slides, so hopefully we'll make it in time. The Fabaceae family, it's this huge family of plants, and it's got some really neat flowers of very different shapes, and we're going to break them down. That's probably what Evan was thinking when he came up with this idea.
That's right. How can I visually tell what's a bean and what's not, and within beans, what am I looking at?
The name Fabaceae comes from a Latin word for bean, which is faba, which is also one of the genera in Fabaceae, the one that faba beans belong to.
I was gonna say, it sounds like faba.
Yeah, and so, and it is, so the bean gave name to the genus, which gave name to the family.
Beautiful.
An old-fashioned name for this family is Leguminosae,
okay,
and which is from the Latin word legumen, which is also another Latin word for bean. And so we don't use that much anymore, but we do use the word legume quite a bit to describe the fruits. But we don't really talk about Leguminosae anymore. So why is this family important? Well, it's the third biggest plant family in all of vascular plants. It's got around 24,000 species, around 800 genera, and it's about 7% of all vascular plants are pea plants of some sort or another.
No kidding.
So it's quite large, and it is also spread out all over the world. Now here's a map I have that's color-coded where they are densely located. Now, can you guys see my cursor?
For sure.
All right, so they are most highly concentrated in the tropical rainforest parts of the world. So that's the Amazon in South America, and the tropical rainforests of Africa, and the tropical rainforests of Southern and Southeast Asia. But they're also extremely highly concentrated in arid climates. In North America, that's going to be Texas and Mexico and Arizona. And then down below in the southern cone where Uruguay and in Argentina are, over into southern Africa, and then kind of eastern and northern Africa, and what we'll call Central Asia. And there's a lot of them in Australia. So they like tropical places, They like arid, dry places, and they like everything in between too. We have here in North Carolina, a decent number of fabids here, pea plants. And we here at the garden, we're really interested in their ornamental traits and the ornamental peas. And I'm going to show a few slides at the end where we talk about some of the ornamental peas that we have in the garden. So it is the third largest family, but it is the second largest source of food for human beings in the world. Now, I don't know about you, I don't eat beans every day, but beans end up being a part of your food chain quite a lot, more than you would think, especially when you consider how they take soybeans and break them apart and shove them into everything else. If you eat a Twinkie, there's soybeans in it.
Yeah.
You know, if you put lipstick on, there's soybeans in that. You know, whatever. There's soybeans in everything. But this family contains everything you might call a bean or a pea or a lentil. It contains peanuts and the related ground nuts. It contains actually tamarind, which is more of a, you think of that as kind of a sweet, sour fruit. It's a Mexican thing. They make tamarind candy out of it and tamarind soda pop and stuff like that.
For sure.
Carob, which is that fake chocolate, that's a bean. Rooibos tea, if you are a tea drinker and you don't like caffeine, you can have decaffeinated rooibos tea. There's the herb fenugreek. Jicama, which I've never had. Have you, Blake, ever had jicama? I've never had jicama. I've seen it at Whole Foods, but I just walked by it. Licorice is in the bean family or pea family. And then there are several plants in the family that you can extract gums out of. You either get them, they are either oozed out onto the trunk and you can collect them there, or they are part of the fruit, part of the bean, and you can mash them up and extract the gums. And those gums are used as thickeners and emulsifiers and things like that in cooking, but also in industrial uses.
Cool.
One of the reasons it's such an important food source is that it is high in protein. Of all the plants, it's probably the highest protein plant there is, except for maybe wolfia, which is 70% protein. But you know, some of these pea plants can have up to 40% protein, 20% protein, pretty high. And so it's an excellent source of protein, not only for humans, but for animals as well. And it's so important. Humans have recognized it's important, have been farming it for 11,000 years, some
kidding.
form of bean or another. So it's very, very important. It's probably only exceeded by grasses for food. Grasses provide about 70% of our calories if you break down all the sources, and beans fulfill a big chunk of the rest.
And while we're on this subject, Jennifer asked a question. She was wondering, is the ubiquitous nature of soy added to products, is that unique to America? Kind of like how we put corn in everything too?
Well, I think not. I think the way soy is popular all over the world as a food and as a fodder and as other things.
For sure.
And the way our global economy works, it may have been invented in America to suck out some chemical out of a soybean and stick it into the car tire.
Sure.
But it certainly isn't limited to here. It's used everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
As I mentioned a second ago, it's used in animal feed, quite a few species. Depending on what kind of meat you like. Cows can have up to 50% of their diet is peas or pea family plants. Pork and chicken less so, their stomachs can't handle certain chemicals. But it's also stuffed into our pet food. So if you have a dog and you're feeding them kibble, a lot of it's going to be soy.
Now, when you say chemicals, you mean the chemicals in the plant naturally?
Yeah, so in the plant naturally. So they're taking the pea and they're mashing it up and pulling out the proteins, which they go one way, and the lipids, which go another way, and the sugars, which go another way. And then those chemicals can be used as the starting point to transform them into more industrially accessible things. Yeah, everything else, exactly. Another use of them is as green manure. This is a plant that you plant in a field, and because pea plants are fixing nitrogen, most of them do, they are fixing nitrogen when you plant them in the field, and then the farmers will plow them under and leave that field for a few months for the nitrogen to break down and soak in, and then they plant their crops, and they've got a dose. That's a dose of nitrogen that they don't need to add with chemical fertilizers. These are natural green manure.
Let's take a moment to elaborate upon that, because I feel like a lot of people hear, oh, clover fixes nitrogen, which means that I can plant clover, and as long as it's in there, it's just sucking nitrogen out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil and feeding all the crops without me having to do anything about it. And it's like, to some extent, yes, it is sucking it out of the atmosphere, but it's affixing it to its physical vegetative matter, and then it's a question of plowing that into the ground. That's how that nitrogen gets into the soil. It doesn't magically get transported from the air to the bean to the plant. Like, you gotta, it catches that nitrogen and you got to get it into the soil.
Certainly some of it is leaking out.
Sure.
Because when it's converted from atmospheric N2, it's converted into ammonium, which is going to be a liquid water soluble thing that can leak out of the plant. Different amino acids and amine structured chemicals, which are also water soluble and can leak out. But the plant's not doing it so it can feed the soil. It's doing it so it can feed itself.
Correct.
So most of that stuff it's reserving inside of the plant for itself. And so you want to, if you're a farmer and you want to get the maximum nitrogen out of your green manure, you are plowing it under and letting it die and start to rot.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. A lot of other uses. There are some really nice fancy lumbers. If any of you have are well-to-do and you might have a fancy desk or dining room table made out of rosewood or something like that. Rosewood is in the pea family, as are several other of these really high dollar lumbers. If you like to grill out in your backyard and put a little mesquite on your grill. Mesquite is a bean family. It's and it imparts a certain flavor to your cooking when you grill with it. There are many other uses. There's dyes and medicines and soybean oil. We're back to soybeans. That's really the king of the Fabaceae
the whole reason we made
human
this
use. Yeah, and you can make biofuel out of it. And then I just put industrial uses as the last bullet point because you can really go down a rat hole and chase down all the thousands of things. And I'm literally not lying. And mostly it's soybean. Car tires have soybeans in them. Crayons, face moisturizing cream has soybeans in it. The padding and the headrest of your car has soybeans in it. So just these materials end up everywhere. And so it's really just amazing how much Fabaceae is used by humans. Of course, we're all gardeners here on this show, the Midweek show, and we like our ornamental plants. So here in North Carolina, there is a good number of Fabaceae plants that we can plant in the garden. I've got a little list here, and some of them don't do all that well here. Some of them are more for like sweet peas. That's more of a northern thing, or an England or thing. But, you know, and lupins a little bit. There are some lupins, but most not. But red buds, which are a big collection here, baptisias, lespedezas, and indigofera, those are all great plants. And albizia, sephora, tons and tons. There are many dozens of ornamental pea plants here at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum, and there's probably 100 or more just in general that would do well in the Southeast U.S. But it's not all good news. Peas, there are a lot of weeds in the pea family too. Kudzu is the one that we all know the best, the vine that ate the South. It's a Japanese set of one of 6 species of Japanese vines brought over for erosion control that just took over everything. And the Chinese wisterias are also not, you know, they're kind of everywhere now as weeds. And albizia, which we have it here as an ornamental tree, but it is also considered to be an invasive exotic. It's from China. There are some agricultural weeds like sicklepod and sesbania. Mesquite, which we like, mesquite is a Southwest U.S. down into Mexico kind of desert, Sonoran desert tree. At least the American mesquite is the one we cook with. But there are also mesquites in Africa, and they have gone wild in Australia. And mesquite, if you've ever grown it, is a thorny kind of small tree, big shrub that makes suckers everywhere and suckers to fill in a spot. And it's just, if you're a human being or a cow or something, it's not a good tree to have too many of in the wrong place, like in Australia. And some of the plants we use as green manures escape and they become weeds. And if you're in Europe, there's this thing called gorse there that you see everywhere. Yellow flowers, beautiful little thing.
And fragrant.
And it's a pea plant, but it's also thorny and it's a pain in the keister for the Europeans. So I mentioned that one of the things that makes pea family plants so important is that they fix nitrogen. The way they do it is unique in the plant family. Or the plant kingdom. there is a group of bacteria called rhizobia, and it's about 80 species of bacteria, and they have an enzyme that can grab N2 gas out of the atmosphere and break it up and stick it into ammonium or amino acids, and then those are available to plants. So that's a really neat trick, and they've been doing that for a couple billion years. And about 60 million years ago, pea plants said, they learned to communicate with these bacteria and said, hey, rhizobia, how about a little quid pro quo? I'll give you a little shelter, and I'll give you a little water and some photosynthates and minerals, whatever you might need. Why don't you give me some nitrogen back? And they said, yeah, let's do it. And so the shelter they give is in the form of these warty knobs or nodules that form on the underground structures of the plant. You can see in the photo. And the bacteria invade them and live inside of them, and they are sheltered by them, and then they trade nitrogen for those things. Not every Fabaceous plant can do it. About 90% can, and 10% can't. The red bud that we're sitting under is one of the ones that can't, unfortunately.
Right.
But there are other plants that do have a symbiotic relationship with other types of bacteria, but they're not hosted inside the plant. So things like Elaeagnus and certain viburnums and alders and things like that, they are talking back and forth with another group called Frankia bacteria, but they're not actually hosting them.
Sure.
So, but nitrogen fixation is a really cool thing. So some trivia: the largest Fabaceous plant in the world is down in the Brazilian rainforest. It's a tree, 290 feet tall. It is the tallest broadleafed tree in the Western Hemisphere. Of course, the only ones that are taller are the conifers in California, the sequoias.
Right.
They're a bit taller. And then the largest pea pod is this woody vine that grows in Central America, and you can see this fellow here holding it.
No kidding.
And that one's like 4 feet long.
That looks like AI, like somebody that has like a giant grub.
It could be. I got this photo off of Facebook, so anything could be happen there. But and the individual beans that are inside them are the size of the palm of your hand. They're about 4 to 6 inches across.
Okay.
So they're huge.
Sure.
And then the smallest one is actually native to the United States in the dry areas of like Idaho, northern Nevada, Utah. In dry areas in there's this teeny little pea plant that is about the size of a nickel. You can see in the photo, it's not much bigger than that fellow's thumbnail. And that is a full-grown plant that's in flower. You can even see the flowers on it. So both big and small, all over the world. Pea plants have the interesting ability to move around. And there's 2 types of movement, and I've put them both on this slide here. The one that you see on the right in the GIF, where you touch the leaf and then the leaf folds up, that's the so-called sensitive plant, or Mimosa pudica. And that is, there's just a few species in genus Mimosa and 1 or 2 species in the genus Neptunia that do this. That is called seismonastic movement, or back when I was a teacher, I called it thigmotrophic movement. That was the word in the book I was teaching my students, but it's the same thing. So you can see that's real time. So you touch the leaf, and within 3 or 4 seconds, the leaves have folded up against the stem. And that's one of the forms of movement. It's not quite unique in the plant family. You can think Venus flytraps and bladderworts of the carnivorous plants also have some movements as well. Then there's another movement that you can see around here. If you get up early enough in the morning and walk out and look at a albizia or some white clover in your turf, you'll notice that the leaves are folded up tight against the branch. But as the sun comes up over a course of 20 or 30 minutes, they will open up and hold themselves upright. And that is called nyctinastic movement. Nyct is the German word for night. And so these are leaves that close up at night and then open up in the day. So that's fairly unique to Fabids. You don't see that much outside of the group. And then there's this one genus called Acacia, and it's one genus called Vachellia within Acacia. Acacia is a big genus, or a big subfamily, that has another symbiotic relationship. That below ground, they're symbiosing with bacteria, and above ground, they are symbiosing, I just made that word
You're
up,
fine.
with ants. And when you do that with ants, that's called myrmecophyly.
Okay.
And where the prefix myrmec is relating to ants.
Yeah.
And they do it by, this acacia is getting these ants to protect it from things like, this is in Africa, so things like giraffes and elephants that want to strip every leaf off the tree.
Right.
And these acacias are already growing these monster thorns to prevent that, but that's still not quite enough. So they recruit these ants, and the ants, when they detect a big animal eating them, they rush out and they start stinging and biting it and push it away. And so the thorns are hollow, and the ants live inside. Those are, and that's called a domatia, like a domicile.
Yeah.
And then the plants also produce nectar through nectaries, but these nectaries are not in flowers where they normally are. They're just growing along the petiole of the leaf or someplace other.
No kidding.
And so they're called extrafloral nectaries, and they make those. And they also, at the ends of their leaves, will exude this lipid-rich, protein-rich goo.
No kidding.
That's little bits of it that the ants like to eat.
Yeah.
So they have this symbiotic relationship that they provide food and shelter for protection.
That's wild.
In the genus Acacia, or in the plant group called Acacia. As I mentioned earlier, Fabaceae are very, very common in tropical rainforests. Depending on the rainforest in the area, up to 40% of the species in the forest can be Fabaceae. And in arid climates, they do very well too. Between 8 and 50% of desert species can be Fabaceae. And remember, Fabaceae are only 7% only of all the known plants. So if they're up to 50% of a geographic area, they're really punching above their weight. They're doing well. All right, we're getting into the part where we're going to talk about what a Fabaceae looks like in the different pieces and parts. So how to recognize a Fabaceae? Well, the first thing you want to look for is a seed pod, because the seed pods are pretty unique. The seed pod is called a legume. It's the type of fruit. And a legume is dry at maturity, and it splits open along two seams. It has a seam on either side of the bean, and it can split open on both sides, and then release the seed. If Alexander, if you want to focus, Evan got us a bean pod. They're not ripe yet. Those are still fresh, semi-fresh. They're not dry yet, but you can see, we all know what bean pods look like, but the fruit can be quite big and can be ornamental, or if it's like a red bud, a lot of people don't actually like the fruit as an ornament because it means that they see it around a lot. But
so we have one seam here, and so you're saying this is also a seam on the backside?
Yes. And if you were to, can you squeeze that and see if you can pop it open just along the seams? Squeeze it this way.
This way?
Yeah, get the pop open along the seams. Maybe it's not ripe enough yet. Nope, maybe not ripe enough. Oh well.
I heard a crack.
Yeah, there it goes. So it will split open only along those seams.
Like opening a letter.
So if you see a fruit and it looks like a bean and it has two seams on it, it's a legume, and that's a sign that you're looking at a pea plant. Another interesting thing is that pea plants have these things called persistent stipules. Now, stipule is a little bit of leaf-like tissue at the base of the leaf where the petiole joins the trunk or the branch. And in most plants, the stipule is there before the bud breaks, and then it dries up and falls off and goes away. And a few plants actually have persistent stipules that hang around afterwards. And you can see some photos of them on the slide. And they can be different sizes, and some of them, like in the pea plant or that plant on the lower right, Amixia, are actually fairly ornamental. When I worked at Plantalites, we grew that Amixia zygomeris, and that was the main ornamental feature that would sell the plant, was these persistent purple stipules at the base of the leaves. Another clue is the leaves, and about 3/4 of the plants in the Fabaceae family have pinnately compound leaves. Now, compound means you have a bud and then a structure called a rachis coming off of the bud with little leaflets dotted all around it. It's not a simple leaf, which is just one big piece of leaf tissue around it. It's little leaflets, as you can see in the photo here.
So this is all one leaf here. This is the only place where my finger is where there's a bud. And this long thing in the middle is called a rachis. And Dennis, you mentioned that these are bipinnate leaves. So actually it's pinnate because all the leaflets come out either side, but also on each leaflet, there's leafletlets that come out either side of those as well.
Yeah, the pinnule and pinnae, we're not going to go into that. The neat thing about this is a very interesting texture. And when we garden for flower color and we garden for leaves and leaf color. And one of the other things we garden for or design with when we garden is texture. And these faboid plants have these really cool fern-like texture, well, 3/4 of them do, that you can put into your garden. And it's, in some cases, very, very attractive.
Yeah, they often have a blue hue as well.
Not about 25% of the fabaceous plants do not have a pinnately compound leaf. They have a palmately compound leaf. If you were to hold your hand out and look at the palm, your fingers are sticking out in all different directions, you get an idea of what a palmate leaf looks like. And you can have different numbers of lobes. You can see white clover has 3, or if you're lucky, 4 leaflets. That lupine there has 5 leaflets. And believe it or not, red buds are compound leaves, but they only have 1 leaflet. It's weird.
That is weird.
In that you can imagine that lupine leaf with 5 leaflets, imagine 4 of them disappeared and there was just 1 leaflet left. It's called unifoliate when that happens, and the taxonomists can tell by when they cut open the leaf and look at the cell structures inside, they can see, well, this cell structure is just like a palmately compound leaf, except that there's only 1 lobe.
Okay, so there's not really any like visual way to tell that something's a unifoliate compound leaf. You'd really have to look into the genetics of it to...
Not the genetics. You can see it morphologically, but under a microscope with a scalpel.
Okay.
You're looking at types of cells and things like that.
Gotcha.
So it's really strange.
So basically all faboids sort of evolved with compound leaves, and somehow red buds ended up with some of them disappeared. Got down to 1.
Gotcha.
Yeah, got down to 1.
Okay.
And that Bauhinia over there with the kind of the cloven hoof leaf is also in the same group as Cercis.
Sure.
And that is a unifoliate, a compound leaf with 1 leaflet.
I recently found a Cercis leaf that looks an awful lot like that Bauhinia leaf. I'm thinking it's that central vein didn't elongate as well, so you get that little dip in it.
Okay.
You put it next to a ginkgo leaf, it looks just like the lobing of a ginkgo as well.
Okay.
But anyway.
Yeah,
it's hard to imagine, but it is imaginable.
You can have every kind of mutation possible with stuff like that, yeah. All right, the next thing that you want, that will tell you if you're looking at a fabaceous plant, is there's this other unique structure at the base of the leaf where the leaf meets the stem. It's called a pulvinus. And that earlier slide when we were looking at the leaves moving and they were folding up, the pulvinus is the hinge around where the movement occurs. So it's a biological hinge. You can actually think of it as it's a structure filled with water. And when it quickly empties all the water out of those cells, that structure can collapse and the leaf can fold up. And then it can slowly pump the water back in and that leaf will stand back up again.
Okay.
So that's what a pulvinus is, and it's recognizable as a little swelling, and I've circled them in red on the different pictures. I was running around the garden taking pictures and trying to find pictures of pulvini, which is the plural, and got a few blurry ones, so that's what they look like. So the presence of a pulvinus, there are very few plants outside of the Fabaceae family that have pulvini. All right, so this slide here is basically the reason we had this lecture. Evan came up with the concept and he's like, I want, the flowers in the Fabaceae family look so different spread throughout the family. Let's break that down. And that's why we had that initial title, Breaking Down Fabaceae. And so this slide kind of describes that. And the traditional way is that Fabaceae was broken up. It was broken up into 3 subfamilies, and these plants were grouped into a subfamily based strictly on their morphology or their shape. That's of the flower. And so you have the mimosa subfamily, and you have the Caesalpinia subfamily, and you have the Faboid subfamily, which today is now called the Papilionoid subfamily, or butterfly pea, is the common way of saying that. And then modern taxonomists got involved and decided to look at genetic structures and also other morphological cellular structures that are not necessarily in the flower. And they decided that the family made better sense. The groupings were more logical and indicative of true evolutionary lineages if they break it up, if they take Caesalpinia and explode it. So they exploded Caesalpinia into 5 subfamilies from 1, and then they merged mimosa into Caesalpinia, into the remaining ones. So you have and the modern group has 6 groups of the Caesalpinia / mimosa, and then those 3, and then the Circid group, which is the red bud group, and the Faboids became the Papilionoids, the butterfly group.
Yes.
Okay. So we're gonna show you flowers from 4 of these. Those 3 that I put in a smaller font and italicized, those are tropical shrubs only, and we will never grow them here. We can't, and so we're not even gonna talk about them. We are all gardeners in the Raleigh area or nearby, so let's talk about what we can see here. So we're gonna talk about 4. We're gonna talk about Caesalpinias, and we're gonna talk about mimosas, and we're going to talk about papilonids, and we're going to talk about circids. And in the upper right, I put a phylogenetic, color-coded phylogenetic tree. You can see the yellow is the papilonids, the butterfly ones, and they are about 3/4 of all the species in Fabaceae. A good chunk of the rest of them are the orange ones, and that's the mashed together mimosa Caesalpinia group, and 3/4 of them are mimosa and 1/4 are Caesalpinia. And then that red section, which is not that many, it's a few hundred species, are the Circid group, which is basically Circis and Bauhinia. And then the remaining ones are the ones we're not going to talk about, are the green and blue ones. All right, so let's dive into, so this is just a next slide. And when Blake puts this on YouTube, you can pause this slide and stop it and really trace it all and have fun with it, but I'm just going to skip on by it. We're going to start with the Caesalpinia group. And this is the Caesalpinia group that does not include the mimosas. It's more of the traditional Caesalpinia group. Evan brought we have a Caesalpinia, something in genus Caesalpinia growing in the garden, Caesalpinia gileasii, and it unfortunately has wilted, but maybe you can get a sense of it. And you can see it's got these beautiful red stamen that are sticking out far from the flower. And then the yellow flowers. It's really, really pretty. The Caesalpinid group have 5 separate petals that you can see separately. And one of them is bigger than the others, or it's differently colored. Okay, and so that one is called the banner, or vexillum if you're fancy, but we'll call it the banner. And then the other 4 are more or less equal. This is the only group, the Caesalpinid / mimosa group, that will have bipinnate leaves. All the other groups of Fabaceae can have pinnate or palmate, but not bipinnate leaves. This group also has a lot of the plants will have those extrafloral nectaries, those things that are feeding the ants. Now, acacia is in this group. It's a mimosid, so it's in the Caesalpinia greater group, and so it's got those extrafloral nectaries. And the ones you might see around here in our garden, if you come here, are Caesalpinia. We have 1 species, Caesalpinia gileasii, which is a Uruguayan plant, and it grows fairly well here. And then Gladitia, which is honey locust or locust tree, and Gymnocladus, which is Kentucky coffee tree. Those are, you don't see them much anymore. They used to be more popular than they are now. And then Senna, which is a herbaceous plant that you can see here. It can be a weed or it can be a garden plant. And those are all local examples of this Caesalpinoideae group. Now the next flower structure you see, and it's the flower group Mimosidae, where they mashed it together with Sessalpinoideae, but it is so morphologically unique that I'm gonna break it out like they used to do and show them to you separately. The flowers in this are very teeny tiny. If you're looking at the slides, look at that red flower on the bottom of the screen, look at the base of the flower, and you see those little red cups. That's the actual flower, those are the flower petals. They are all fused together into a cup, and then from that cup emerge really, really long, colorful stamen, and the stamen are what, as gardeners, we get excited about because they are the aesthetic thing that we can see in this group of plants. And they are frequently colored, or colorful. Sometimes they're white, just plain, but most, they can be pink or yellow or red and really, really pretty. So they come up with this kind of powder puff look to it. Now each flower has 10 stamen in it, but as you see from the picture on the bottom, the flowers cluster together, so you actually end up with this visually, you see hundreds and hundreds of stamen. It's actually a cluster of flowers, each with 10 stamen coming out. Around here, albizia is a plant that is in the mimosa group that you can see, and they're in full bloom right now. So if you want to brave the heat and come on out, you can see albizia julibrissin in flower here. It's very pretty. But also acacia and mesquite are in that group as well. The next group, and this is the biggest group, this is about 75% of all the Fabaceae plants are in this butterfly pea group, Papillonioideae. And the reason they called that, papillon is the French word, or papillon for butterfly. And I took a butterfly picture and bisected it, and you can see there's upper wings and lower wings. And some old taxonomist said, hey, the flowers in this group kind of look like butterfly flowers. Now this group has 5 petals, one banner petal, which is usually bigger than the others. Then it's got 2 off to the side that are called wings, wing petals. And then it's got 2 lower petals that are fused together into something called a keel. So it's the banner petal, which can be lobed, plus the 2 wing petals, which give this kind of butterfly effect to this group.
It gets a little tricky with some of them. I'm holding an erythrina here, and in my thumb is the banner petal. And then here are the tiny little 4 other petals that when it's all closed up, you barely even see. You really only see the banner. But it's a really nice plant for us here.
It's a beautiful plant. It is one of the more extreme forms of the papillonids, but it is, yeah, you can see all the different parts there. And if you look at the slides, there's a baptisia right below the butterfly, and you can see the big banner petal. It actually has a lobe in it, and it looks kind of like butterfly wings. The 2 wing petals are actually bent forward and they're not fused, but they're kind of surrounding the keel, so you don't even see the keel on the baptisia.
And then you were saying Indigofera is also in the Papillonidae?
Yeah, and if you look really closely, I don't know if Alexander can zoom in that much, but each one of those little florets is a little papillonid or butterfly pea-like flower.
Teeny tiny.
Teeny tiny. But this is what 3/4 of the pea family plants are like, are this butterfly or Papillionidae. Oh, I've been practicing that at my desk and I still can't get it.
It was a valiant effort.
We're gonna call them butterfly peas so I don't look dumb.
There you go.
And then another interesting feature, which is in the erythrina, is that the stamen, the male parts, are there's 10 of them, and 9 of them are fused together, and 1 of them is hanging free. And so you have this 9+1 arrangement in the Papillonidae, which is unusual too. And so some local Papillonidae, butterfly peas that you might see in the garden, lupins, sweet peas, that's not here, northern places. Coral bean, which is erythrina, baptisia, sephora, white clover, which there's a picture of here. I have a greatly enlarged picture of white clover. You can see each little floret is a papillonid. Lespedeza, Indigofera, wisteria, all of those things are papillonids.
Well, this is tricky now because we got into this because I thought maybe there'd be a lot of telltale signs on which part of which group a plant is in.
I mean,
but this takes up 75% of Fabaceae.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're not going to get down to the right. No, with this exercise we're doing here, you can get down to the family. Do I see a pea-like flower? Do I see a pulvinus? Do I see a bean, a legume? Do I see pinnate? Yeah, compoundly pinnate leaf or palmate leaf. Yeah, and those are clues. There are other plants outside of the family that have individually those things, but those are clues that start adding up and say, hey, I'm looking at a fabid. All right, now in the Cercis group, which is one of the newer groups that was exploded out of Caesalpineae, is the basically two species around here, Cercis, genus Cercis and genus Bauhinia. And they were broken out because they have the unifoliate, that fancy palmately compound leaf with only one leaflet.
Sure.
And then they have flowers that are, they're called almost papillonate.
Okay.
Okay, and what that means is, especially if you're looking at the Cercis canadensis flower at the bottom of the screen there, you can see a banner petal and two wing petals up top, and you can see a fused keel down below.
Oh yeah.
Now what you might not notice is that the banner petal is actually in front of the wings in this group, but in a real papillonid, the banner petal is behind the wings. So yeah, but we're getting into the weeds here. This is really what a taxonomist gets excited about and not a gardener. But that's how one of the ways you can tell which group you're in.
They're really pretty.
They are very pretty.
Yeah.
And
I love Cercis that fill up on the trunk. I forget what the word for that.
It's called cauliflory.
Like
so like cauliflower, but it's actually a different Latin root. Cauliflower, caul means head in the cauliflower, but a cauliflory, caul means stem, as in caulescent.
Okay. As in the trunk.
Yeah. All right. So that's our little travel through the family, and now we can talk about the faboids we have here at the Arboretum. And so we have 145 unique taxa here at the Arboretum in our 10 acres, so that's not bad. Half of them are either a redbud or a baptisia. Those are our two big groups. And then we also have interesting selection of some other genera as well. Now, Evan was too busy watering. It's so hot and dry. He's out in the garden watering. I asked him, what are your faves? I want to put them on the slide. So unfortunately it says Evan's faves blank.
I have them in my head here.
Okay, go ahead.
They're not here in the garden. I just wanted to mention, excuse me, I got to go up with the North American Rock Garden Society to Canada, and I was botanizing around with Tim, and I was just in love. So there was 3 major genera we saw. There was also clover, but Hediocerum, Oxytropis, and Astragalus that were they just dotted these super like dry alpine landscapes, roadsides. So you got purples and pinks and yellows and whites, and it just was a nice added splash of color. And I was like, that was just last week. So I was thinking about them and thinking about Fabaceae, and I was like, you start noticing things.
Yeah, Astragalus is a huge genus, like 500 species, and it's all over in arid areas, all over the western U.S. It's called locoweed, if you guys know the common name locoweed. They call it that because if your cattle eat enough of it, there's a toxin in there and they go a little loco on you. But it's a pretty plant in a dry area. All right, so those are Evan's favorites. 2 of mine, one is Dalbergia hupahana, which is a rosewood tree. There's actually, it's a hardy, cold hardy rosewood. And it's here, ours is like 30 years old, so it's proven its metal. And it's over here not too far, and it's 50, 60 feet tall. It's a nice big full-grown tree. It's a beautiful thing. And I like it. It's very rare in the United States right now. So part of me likes it because it's got a story behind it, the rosewood, and part of me likes it because it's so rare. I also like Myospermum susanum, which is a Arroyo sweetwood, is a common name, and it's a Mexican / Southern Arizona type plant, but it's cold hardy here too. Ours has been around for 30 years. And I like it. It is a small tree, smaller even than a redbud, with little white flowers that are fragrant. And if the air is still, they will perfume the area around the tree when it's in bloom. And the leaflets are really, really small, which lets in a decent, it's shaded underneath, but not heavily shaded, so you can garden underneath it. So it's kind of this perfect little townhouse tree that is small, but you can still garden under it, and it's sweetly fragrant. So I really like it. And because it's a Sonoran desert plant, it's insanely drought tolerant, which these days here in Raleigh, it's a good thing to have as well.
Sounds like a great replacement for ligustrum.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it would be a good one, or a smaller red bud, you know, except it's white flowered, not red flowered. The biggest group of fabids we have at the Arboretum are red buds in the genus Cercis, and we have a nationally recognized collection, recognized by the United States National Arboretum as one of the largest or second largest collection in the United States of red buds. And we like red buds. It's a native plant, at least Cercis canadensis is. It's a small tree, so it fits into modern landscapes. It's got great, pretty flowers. And in these modern forms, we have the mutants that have colorful leaves as well, that breeders have taken and started combining all of these mutations. This plant, nurserymen and gardeners have been collecting mutants since the 1940s. And so you have a white flowered one, and you have a bicolored flowered one, and you have a weeping one, and a dwarf one, and a yellow leaved one, and a purple leaved one, and so on and so on. And the breeders now are taking these things and combining all these traits. Now, our former director here, Denny Werner, is a redbud breeder. So part of the reason we have such a large and awesome redbud collection is because of Denny Werner. He keeps giving us all these cool new redbuds. The two on the left, the top and the left one on the slide, are both Denny Werner releases. Flamethrower has a cool multicolored foliage that everyone just goes gaga over. It won some award at
I think the Royal Hort Society?
Yeah.
Chelsea Flower Show?
Chelsea Flower Show,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alexander.
And then the one on the bottom left, Golden Falls, is combining the mutants that are dwarf, weeping, and chartreuse leaved, or yellow leaved, into one single plant. It's a really, really cool little plant. The one on the right, bottom right, is an older selection of Cercis chinensis that we really like. We put a cultivar name on it, K's Early Hope, to commemorate Kay Yao, the NC State basketball coach who died of cancer a few decades ago. Our collection has all of the different mutant traits and mixes of them that you can think of. Plus we have 6 of the 10 wild species in the garden as well. If you want to come here and see our redbud collection, it blooms mostly in late March and early April. And then, so come then to see it in flower, and then come in like May and June, early summer, the foliage is at its brightest and best. As the summer goes on, especially the purples will tend to fade a little bit. But so right now, actually, we're getting a little bit late here in July, but come on out and enjoy the redbuds anyway.
Yeah, they held up pretty well.
Yeah, they're holding up pretty well considering the drought. I bet there's one that's a Mexican one that's probably holding up even better. Cercis canadensis variety mexicana. We have a couple taxa of it here. The next big one we have is Baptisia. And we have 53 specimens of it in 6 different species, plus hybrids between species. We have a variety of flower colors. Come out and see them. It is in bloom in like mid-April to early May. And some of the more deserty ones are in bloom later in May, but mostly if you come here, you mostly want to come mid-April to early May, just after the red buds are done. Then you can enjoy all the Baptisias in bloom, yeah. All right, but if you want to come now, we certainly invite you out now. It's a brutally hot day, and it's going to be even hotter this weekend, but come on out and enjoy the rest of the fabids. Here's a list of some that I walked around last week in preparation for this talk, looking at what's in bloom in the Fabaceae family. And here's a list of genera you can find. Albizia, which we've already seen. Evan got a sample of that. Amorpha Caesalpinia, which is in bloom right now in the main border, is absolutely beautiful. Erythrina right next to it in the main border. We have the Erythrina bidwilliae, and what a combination that is with the yellow and the red. Mm-hmm. And Meledia, purple, beautiful shrubby plant with purple flowers. It's called summer wisteria, and the flowers are kind of clumped together like a wisteria.
It's a lot better behaved though.
Yeah, it's way better behaved. We also have Wisteriopsis that's in bloom now. It is a vine, and it is also well behaved. It is also called summer wisteria. So those are some really nice plants if you come out right now. and enjoy the hot Fabaceae hot beans in the garden.
Hot beans.
So, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I think that was excellent.
Did I cover it all?
Yeah,
Okay.
you really did.
Okay, well, there were just a couple of questions that came in. So Sandy was wondering if you know if any non-bean parts of a Fabaceae, like the stems or the leaves or the roots, are used as ingredients in other products. In addition. If so, what?
Well, the root of glycyrrhiza, that's licorice.
Okay.
So it is a little bean plant with a little papillonid butterfly flower. It's a cute little perennial if you want to grow it. And the roots are used in licorice. The gums, so gum arabic is actually, it's exuded out of the trunk of the plant.
Okay.
And guar gum is, actually they get that out of the bean, never mind. But then there's another gum that comes out of Fabaceae plants as well. All right, let's see. Well, rooibos tea, you're eating the dried leaves, just like with regular tea, which is the dried leaves of camellia. Rooibos tea is the roasted dried leaves of this plant that grows in Africa, and they farm it in southern Africa right now. Jicama is a root. Fenugreek is an herb. You're either eating the leaves if you want. It's got like a fake maple syrup is flavored with fenugreek. That's the flavor you're tasting. So you're either eating the leaves or the seeds, but the leaves are in that case are non-bean related. So yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's others.
Oh, sure. Alrighty. Well, Nancy was wondering if we've ever had Myrospermum susanum at plant sales.
I don't think so.
No kidding.
Ours does flower.
Yeah.
And I will put the seed collection team on getting seed off of it.
No doubt.
I can't remember that. And I don't have our database up in front of me, but otherwise I could check and tell you for sure, but I don't think we have. Not in my recent memory, at least. I've been here 6.5 years and not in 6.5 years at least.
No kidding. Do you think seed would be the best way to propagate that?
I have no idea if it can root easily or not. I know other things like redbud do not root very well.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it's entirely possible that it's easy to root it. I have no idea. Sure. That's a question for Uncle Google.
Good old Uncle Google. Sophia was wondering if you could rank any of these fabaceous plants for caterpillars and pollinator value, which would come up at the top?
Caterpillar and pollinator value. Well, yeah, clover is great for butterflies. In fact, that's one of the reasons I love growing clover in my turf. I don't treat it as a weed. You have all these little butterflies fluttering over your turf grass. It's a beautiful thing. So that's a great one. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, that appears to be all of the questions that came in for today, and that is all the time we have for today anyway. So thank you so much, Evan, for being here with the samples of beans. We greatly appreciate your efforts, and thank you, Dennis, for pulling together this presentation and taking us through the bean family. It was incredibly informative.
Yeah, it was. I liked it. I liked studying it too. It was fun.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on the midweek program today. We are back next week, right? Yes, we will be back next week. Evan and Sophia will be talking about propagation by layering, which should be interesting and fun. So we will see you all next time. Y'all take care.